So today we're going to be looking at vanilla settings and title update settings. It's important to understand the differences between the two, especially before Reach gets here on MCC. Now they will be using the title update settings in general for MCC Reach, except for Invasion, I believe. We're going to look at the DMR here. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Bloom, I want you to look at the inner crosshair circle. When I fire, it expands. If I don't let that circle fully recover, so if I don't pace my shots and I just start spamming, look how it expands. When the circle expands like that and I'm just spamming shots, the shot has a chance to land anywhere within that expanded larger circle, meaning you want to pace your shots. You want to time your shots to get an accurate spread. Even though my crosshair was set just on this center spot right here, since I wasn't pacing my shots, the spread was all over the place. Now at a distance like this, it's not a really big deal, but the further away we get from opponents, the more it actually matters. So let me go grab a little bit more DMR ammo here. I brought the needle rifle also because it's important to understand its effective range and the huge difference that Title Update had on its Bloom settings. So here's what it looks like to time your shots. You want to let the crosshair pretty much fully reset, and if you're doing so, you're going to have all of your shots landing within that inner circle. However, during gunfights, this was a huge contention point for players, not just the pro scene, who had a very apprehensive response to Bloom, especially in its vanilla state, but even the casual player base. It slowed gunfights down, and it was frustrating because sometimes you get into a fight with somebody who's spamming, who luckily would get that last shot on you. And it just led to randomness impeding into a gameplay loop that randomness wasn't that big of a factor in. Now granted, Halo 3 had to settle on some modified settings for MLG to reduce some of the randomness in the spread. Favin has a really great video talking about that. I'll link on screen now. But vanilla settings for Bloom, kind of frustrating, and you have to time your shots extremely well. I'm going to show you the same test here with the needle rifle. If I hold triggers down, look how big that crosshair expands out. And the spread becomes pretty ridiculous. However, in Title Update, the needle rifle is an absolute monster of a weapon because of what they did. So what 343 ended up doing was adjusting the maximum reticule expansion on the headshot weapons, the DMR, the needle rifle, and the pistol, based on an original value of 100%. So essentially, 85% Bloom is what Title Update settings are, meaning I can pace my shots a whole lot faster. And as such, gunfights became more predictable and a lot more fun. Now, I'm going to spam at full speed here, and yes, the crosshair will still expand if you're not timing your shots whatsoever, but it's not nearly as egregious an offender as it was in the vanilla settings. The spreads were a lot better and easier to manage, and honestly, it sped up the pace of the game and made it more consistent. However, it had some interesting effects. So the needle rifle contracted just as fast as it expanded, meaning Title Update needle rifle is the same as no Bloom needle rifle. I'm holding the trigger down here, and as you can see, because of that 85% Bloom setting, the needle rifle is an absolute freaking laser beam. So if you ever see a needle rifle in Title Update settings, you'll want to pick it up and you want to use it. It's an absolute beast. 343 actually ended up removing the needle rifle from loadouts in the Slayer Pro game types. 85% Bloom was helpful for the pistol, but not as much as Zero Bloom. Now, Zero Bloom was utilized in the MLG playlist, which I'll talk about here a little bit later in the video. There were a handful of other important changes that occurred with Title Update. One of the biggest ones to that is bleed through. So in Halo Reach vanilla settings, you did not have damage passing through a player's shields into their health pool. What do I mean by that? So if I shoot the enemy here 1, 2, 3 times, and I walk up and melee him, notice how all it does is break his shield. Doesn't matter that I've done essentially a very similar thing that Halo 2 and Halo 3 players would be used to at this point. With no bleed through, it means melee damage did not pass through the shield. So even if he has just a tiny sliver of his shield left, the only time I'm going to get melee damage on him is if his shield is fully dropped. As such, you saw a lot of players doing a double melee in order to break the shield with the first attack and then melee again to take the enemy player out. Now, damage bleed through was added for Title Update, meaning 1, 2, 3 plus a melee now kills. You don't have to break their shield in order to damage their health. While it might not seem like a huge difference, it really absolutely transformed the pace of the game and was a positive step. In vanilla settings, Armor Lock made the player completely invincible to damage. Until that shield broke, you weren't going to do any damage to the enemy player, and it was really irritating. Pre-title armor lock could also do this thing called plasma shredding. So if I throw the grenade and then I turn on armor lock, I literally get to throw the grenade off of me. Now, if you tried that same thing after title update, what ends up happening is you die the way it's meant to be. Also, now when you're in armor lock in title update, taking damage reduces the amount of time the enemy player has in their armor lock state. So in title update, if you see an enemy armor lock and you throw a grenade at them, it's going to end up popping that armor lock a lot sooner. So it's worthwhile attacking enemies when they're in that armor locked state because it's going to be a lot easier to push them out of it. In title update, the active Camo ability, the time usage was reduced by 15 seconds. Title update also disabled the sword block. So in vanilla settings, if you melee attacked at the right time as somebody was lunging at you with the energy sword, you could actually block it. This was something that you could only do back in Halo 3 with another energy sword. In title update, you can't do it anymore, unfortunately. But it was a really cool technique. It was something that I think kind of was a high skill ceiling thing that was sort of fun. It took a very long time for Halo Reach to get to a point with good settings that were fun to watch as well as good for the pros to compete on. And that's because they were using vanilla Bloom settings for a long time, and they were begging Bungie to allow them to make changes. You pair this with the fact that Reach launched with some of the worst competitive maps on disc out of the whole Halo gamut, and you had a recipe for what many players believe was the beginning of the end of Halo competitive play. Obviously, things have improved a lot with H5 and HCS, not nearly the popularity that the game once had in terms of MLG's viewership, but it is nice to see a more stable ecosystem coming back and a recultivation of competitive Halo. Make no mistake though, a big part of that was Halo Reach's launch settings and the MLG players and scene having to make do with what they were given. When 343 took over Halo Reach from Bungie, they implemented title update as we've talked about here. That gave the opportunity for MLG to use no bloom, no sprint, run speed 120% with the needle rifle loadout disabled for MLG V7 settings. And guess what? It was awesome. It took a very long time to get to that point, but finally MLG settings were a blast to watch. Pro play started to look and have the excitement that Halo 3 MLG did. Now granted, they were playing every single map on Forge Canvas because for the most part the maps on disc, like I said, didn't lend themselves too many opportunities for good competitive play. And it's just a shame that it took till the very end of Reach to get to that point. And I think it's kind of a good lesson in general. I'm a firm believer that one of the most crucial identifying aspects of Halo is its simplicity. Halo has always been about simplicity, easy to learn but hard to master. That really awesome dance or ballet between good players. It's like sword fighting to me when you have good Halo players in a strafe battle. Elements that were pulled directly from other games, such as the armor abilities, just didn't scale very well and clashed with that Halo identity. It doesn't mean that Halo can never look for new and creative, innovative opportunities to change the sandbox, but those innovations should be added to the game, not subtractive. So start with the known identity of Halo, what has been successful in the past. Look at Halo 2, look at Halo 3. And then you can build from there. But if those extra additions eclipse that original base simplicity, the elegance of that simple gameplay loop, then I think you lose the identity of Halo, and thus the popularity wanes. And I don't know, that's maybe my take between Reach and Halo 4, trying to find a new identity and kind of missing the mark. I find them both to be very fun games, but they never got the attention or the huge, numbers that Halo 3 did. What, Halo 3, 14.5 million copies sold? Like, it's incredible how popular that game was. I know that was a little bit of a tangent there, but just some food for thought. If you enjoyed this style of video, please let me know down in the comments below. If you want to see more kind of tech history videos about Reach, more than happy to, because that was an era I lived through and I had a great time. I know many of you guys who are still here on the channel watched and played and experienced it, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. Hit the little alarm bell so that YouTube cannot send you notifications, because apparently now you have to hit the bell and show all notifications. It's getting ridiculous, man. Follow me over on Twitter at BBKDRAGOON. I love to talk with you guys over there. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you again very soon.